The galaxy had not known real peace in centuries. Wars came and went. Some fought over resources, others over religion, others still over the slightest insult given to the wrong monarch at the wrong time. Treaties were signed in gold and broken in blood. In the ruins of 1,000 shattered civilizations, a fragile balance had emerged. An agreement of convenience, not trust. It was within this uneasy stillness that humanity arrived, the newest voice in the chorus of galactic politics, and perhaps the most unpredictable. To the older civilizations, humans were anomalies, creatures of soft flesh, short lifespans, and endless adaptability. They fought with a fury that seemed reckless, then spoke with diplomacy that seemed disarming. Their fleets had appeared seemingly from nowhere during the last Great War, turning the tide in places the galaxy had thought lost. Yet now, in peacetime, they sent diplomats instead of destroyers. Some in the Galactic Council saw this as maturity. Others saw it as an opportunity. Among them was the King of Varick Prime, an alien sovereign whose reign had survived assassination attempts, economic collapses, and scandals too numerous to count. He ruled with charm when it suited him and cruelty when it didn't. To him, humans were a resource, clever but naive, capable of great use but ultimately manipulable. The human representative sent to his court was, to his eyes, an ideal mark. She was tall for her species, dressed in the understated style of human officials. No jewels, no ostentatious weapons, just a simple black diplomatic uniform. Her ship arrived in perfect timing, docking at the king's primary orbital station with precision of a machine. No fanfare, no escort. The king smiled at the thought. She would learn quickly that in his domain, modesty was interpreted as weakness. The docking bay was lined with the king's guards, their armor polished to a mirror sheen, weapons visible as a reminder of who held the power here. The alien courtiers whispered each other as she disembarked. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes scanning the room with clinical precision. The king, watching from his private gallery above, noted the lack of awe. That annoyed him. Every other ambassador looked up at the vaulted ceilings, at the crystal arches that framed the station's inner ring, at the living murals that told the story of his victories. She did not. She walked straight to the waiting escort, acknowledged him with a nod, and left the bay without a word. That night, in his private chambers, the king convened his closest advisers. The woman would not leave the station alive, not because she had offended him, although her indifference gnawed at him, but because of opportunity. The humans had gained too much influence in the council too quickly. Their fleets were fast, their technology dangerously adaptive, their military tactics unpredictable. It would not take much to plant seeds of distrust in the minds of other rulers. An accidental death here, far from human space, would cast suspicion everywhere and weaken their position. He would even make it appear as if a rival world had arranged it. The counselors murmured approval. In Varick culture, assassination was a game as much as a crime. The rules were unwritten but well understood. A ruler could arrange a death, so long as it could be passed off as misfortune. Poison in a banquet cup, a balcony railing that gave way, an unfortunate shuttle malfunction. The important thing was deniability. The king was good at this game. The day of the banquet arrived with the full weight of Varick tradition. The central hall was a spectacle of alien opulence. Towering pillars carved from a single crystal mine in the outer moons, chandeliers of living fireflies encased in transparent spheres, and a table stretching nearly the length of the hall, laden with dishes from dozens of worlds. Exotic fruits that glowed faintly in the dim light, cuts of meat from creatures extinct on their homeworlds but preserved in genetic vaults, wine that shimmered with tiny motes of suspended light, an intoxicant as beautiful as it was deadly. The human diplomat was seated at the far end, in a place of honor that was, by design, also the most isolated. The king took the head of the table, flanked by his most trusted allies. Between them, subtle glances passed, the silent confirmation of a plan already set in motion. The servant pouring the humans wine had been paid well to ensure her cup was touched by the smallest drop of a toxin, a dose so precise that it would not act until hours later, long after she had left the hall. The death would appear natural, the body found cold in her guest quarters by morning. The king watched her closely as she was served. She raised a glass but did not drink immediately. instead placing it beside her plate and engaging in quiet conversation with the noble seated next to her. Her tone was polite, her questions precise, showing genuine interest in the culture she was being told about. The king found himself irritated again. There was no deference in her speech, no nervousness at speaking in his presence. At last, she lifted the glass. The king leaned back in his seat, prepared to watch the first step of his plan unfold. She raised it slightly, as though to toast, and smiled not at him, but the noble beside her, and set the glass back down without drinking. She reached instead for a tall carafe of water, and filled her cup of that instead, sipping it without comment. The poison wine remained untouched for the rest of the meal. The king's jaw tightened. Had she suspected, or was it mere coincidence? It didn't matter, he told himself. He could try again. The night's entertainment began. Performers from across the galaxy, dancers moving with impossible fluidity, singers whose voices carried harmonics that seemed to vibrate in the bones. She watched attentively, applauding at the proper moments, yet her eyes were always moving, as though measuring distances, memorizing faces. When the banquet ended, the guests departed in streams of laughter and conversation. The king remained seated, considering. This had not gone as planned, but he was patient. The human would not leave alive. In the following days, his court continued its routines of politics and ceremony. The human diplomat attended every scheduled meeting, spoke in council chambers with measured calm, and toured the station's public areas with polite curiosity. She seemed to take genuine interest in Varick culture, its architecture, its rituals, its history. Yet there was something about her that unsettled those who spent time in her presence. Some said it was her eyes, sharp, unblinking, too focused for comfort. Others said it was the way she listened without giving away her own thoughts, leaving those she spoke with unsure of what she truly believed. The king tried again. This time it was a structural failure, a balcony railing on the observation deck, overlooking the swirling storms of Varick Prime below. The timing was perfect. She would lean against it while admiring the view. It would give way, and she would plummet into the violent winds far beneath. No trace of her body would be recovered, and the accident would be blamed on aging infrastructure. The banquet's failure had bruised the king's pride, but the public collapse of the second attempt, the balcony that never claimed its victim, was a wound he could not ignore. Within days, quiet laughter began to drift through the court, quickly stifled when he entered the room, but never forgotten. It was the kind of laughter that could rot a ruler's image from the inside out. For a sovereign like the king of Varick Prime, perception was everything. His rule depended as much on fear as it did on alliances, and if his enemies suspected weakness, they would move in for the kill. He needed to reassert dominance. But doing so against a human diplomat who now seemed immune to every snare would take more than subtle poisons or faulty railings. It would require something public, something that would strip her dignity and make humanity look foolish before the eyes of the galaxy. When the council summit convened on the station, the king saw his chance. Delegates from over 30 worlds gathered in the Grand Assembly Chamber, an amphitheater of tiered seating surrounding a central floor where debates were conducted. Here, politics were as much performance as policy. The king was a master of this stage, twisting words and bending narratives until even his rivals found themselves applauding him. He invited the human diplomat to speak on behalf of her people. It was an honor, he said, though in truth it was bait. His opening remarks were laced with veiled accusations, references to younger civilizations forgetting the wisdom of their elders, mentions of reckless intervention in conflicts they scarcely understood. He recounted the recent history of the Void War, omitting key facts and reframing others to paint humanity as opportunists who had profited from the suffering of others. The plan was simple: provoke her into a defensive outburst. Humans, he believed, were too proud to let an insult stand, especially in public. An emotional reaction would make her seem unprofessional, unworthy of the council's trust. She rose to speak when prompted. Her voice was calm, steady, and clear. She began not with rebuttals, but with thanks, gratitude to the council for welcoming her people, acknowledgement of the sacrifices made by countless worlds during the war. Only then did she address the king's claims, each one dismantled with precision. She cited archival records from the council's own database, producing specific timestamps, communications, and battlefield reports that directly contradicted his version of events. She did not accuse him of lying. She did not raise her voice. She simply let the facts hang in the air like a blade suspended over his head. When she finished, there was silence in the chamber. Then, slowly, several delegates began to applaud. Others joined in until the sound filled the hall. The king forced himself to smile, but inside his rage boiled. She had not only avoided his trap, she had turned it against him, making him look careless, uninformed, perhaps even dishonest. Worse, she had done it without ever crossing the line into personal insult. There was nothing he could use against her. In the days that followed, subtle shifts rippled through the court. Nobles who once hung on the king's every word began to linger near the human during receptions, striking up cautious conversations. Merchants brought her gifts of local delicacies. Mid-ranking officials approached her with tidbits of information. Minor trade disputes, rumors about rival factions, whispers of discontent. She never promised them anything in return, but she remembered their names, their faces, their concerns. The king saw it all and understood that she was building influence. His next move had to be decisive. Diplomacy was too slow a weapon now. He needed something more immediate, something that could not be turned against him. The opportunity came in the form of a religious ceremony sacred to the Varric and feared by outsiders. The right of challenge. By ancient tradition, any guest who accepted the king's invitation to the rite was expected to participate in its central contest. A duel fought with additional weapons, not to the death, but to submission. Refusal to participate was considered a deep insult, one that could justify retaliation under Varric law. The king issued the invitation in full view of the court, his voice carrying across the chamber. It was a challenge she could not politely refuse. The moment she accepted, he knew he had her. No human could best a trained Varric warrior in melee combat, especially not under ritual conditions where ranged weapons and modern technology were forbidden. The day of the duel, the arena was filled to capacity. The king's chosen champion, a veteran of dozens of such contests, towered over the human by nearly 2 heads. His carapace gleamed under the arena lights, his claws wrapped around the haft of a heavy ceremonial glaive. She was given a standard weapon for her size, a curved short blade meant for quick strikes, but useless against the reach of her opponent's weapon. The match began with the clash of ceremonial gongs. The champion lunged immediately, his strikes heavy and precise, designed to overwhelm her defense. She did not meet his attacks head-on. Instead, she moved with an economy of motion, never in the same place twice, forcing him to adjust, forcing him to waste energy. When she struck, it was not to injure but to disrupt. Small taps of the glaive shaft, quick flicks at the joints of his armor. It was unconventional, nothing like the fluid, sweeping combat style the Varric trained for. The duel stretched longer than anyone expected. The champion's breathing grew labored. His strikes became slower. Then, in one decisive moment, she stepped inside his guard, hooked the short blade behind his knee, and forced him to the ground. Her blade rested lightly against his throat, not cutting, just present. She stepped back at once, allowing him to rise, and bowed in the Varric fashion. The match was over. The crowd erupted in disbelief. No outsider had ever bested a Varric champion in ritual combat without drawing blood. The king managed a tight smile, but the damage was done. She had not only won, but done so without humiliation to the champion, preserving the honor of the right, while still proving herself formidable. It was after this that the whispers began in earnest. Some said she had been trained by the elite warriors of her people. Others said she had fought in battles the council had buried in classified archives. A few spoke of a name that sent chills through veterans of the Void War, Baba Yaga, the ghost of the battlefield, a human operative who had commanded fleets with impossible efficiency, whose campaigns left no survivors to tell the tale. Most dismissed it as legend. But the king noticed how those who fought in the war avoided her gaze, as if afraid of what they might see there. The king's paranoia deepened. The more he tried to move against her, the more the court seemed to close ranks, not in his favor, but in hers. Even those who had reason to fear humanity began to see her as a stabilizing force, someone who could be an ally in the chaotic currents of galactic politics. that made her dangerous in a way no weapon could. The king's sleep was broken by visions of failure. In them, the human never died, no matter what trap he set. In them, her gaze lingered just long enough to make him feel as though she could see his thoughts laid bare. Awake, he found the feeling was worse. Every passing day tightened the net around him, not by her hand alone, but by the quiet erosion of loyalty among his court. Allies once dependable now hesitated before answering him, and rivals seemed emboldened in ways that only made sense if they no longer feared him entirely. He knew the cause. It was not that they loved the human, though some surely did. It was that she had made herself impossible to ignore. In conversation, she revealed nothing, yet left others certain she understood them better than they understood themselves. In council, she asked questions that forced the room to confront truths long buried under layers of ceremony and pretense. In the public spaces of station, she walked with the same unhurried stride she had on her first day, as though nothing and no one could touch her. The king had only one chance left. The quiet methods had failed. The public methods had failed. Even the dangerous plays, the ones that risked his own position, had failed. She would leave soon, her mission complete, and when she returned to human space, she would carry stories with her. Stories that would spread in every port, every diplomatic hall, every council chamber. If he could not end her here, then he would have to cripple her reputation so thoroughly that she would never be able to use her influence against him. The plan he settled on was desperate, but elegant in its simplicity. Pirates, sworn enemies of Varric Prime, had been operating along the outer lane for months. The king's intelligence network knew their movements well. Indeed, some of their captains owed him debts. A covert arrangement would be made. They would intercept the human shuttle en route to her departure point, destroy it in open space, and scatter any trace across the void. Officially, the pirate would be blamed, their bounty increased, and the king's grief at the diplomat's death would be put on display. The details were arranged in secret. Payment was transferred through layers of intermediaries. The chosen mercenary band was the sort known for vicious efficiency. No survivors, no wreckage left worth recovering. The king allowed himself to believe that this time, finally, the problem would be solved. But she had been preparing too. Whatever her mission had been on Varric Prime, it had never been simply to negotiate trade agreements or exchange pleasantries. The king's hostility had not caught her off guard. It confirmed something she already suspected. The attempted poison, the failed railing, the duel, the sabotage barge, each had been catalogued, studied, and filed away. She did not move against him directly. Instead, she began shaping the battlefield beyond his sight. Shortly before her scheduled departure, an unassuming freighter left human space on what appeared to be a routine supply run. Its transponder codes identified it as a merchant vessel. Its cargo manifest listed industrial parts and medical supplies. Inside, however, was a heavily armed escort craft, its weapons hidden beneath retractable plating, its crew veterans of the Void War. They had one task: to shadow the Diplomat shuttle without being detected until the right moment came. On the day she left the station, everything unfolded as the king expected. She boarded her shuttle alone, accompanied only by a token escort from his court, a gesture meant to suggest goodwill. The vessel cleared Varric space without incident, following the assigned corridor toward neutral territory. Hours later, the pirate ships emerged from the dark, engines flaring as they closed the distance. The pirates hailed the shuttle with the casual arrogance of those who believe themselves in control. They ordered her to cut engines and prepare for boarding. The reply came not from her shuttle, but from somewhere behind them, a tight beam transmission they never had time to trace. A moment later, the hidden warship decloaked, its weapon systems already hot. The first volley sheared through the lead pirate vessel's shields, splitting its hull in two. The second crippled the second ship's engines before it could turn to flee. The engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. From the shuttle's cockpit, the Diplomat watched in silence as debris tumbled into the void. The warship transmitted a brief, coded acknowledgement before vanishing into faster-than-light transit, leaving no sign it had ever been there. The pirates were gone, their corpses drifting in the cold, and the shuttle continued on its way as if nothing had happened. By the time word of the attack reached the king, it was already too late. The incident could not be concealed. The destruction had been recorded by long-range civilian sensors on a nearby mining platform. The footage showed the shuttle unscathed, the pirates annihilated with surgical precision by a ship whose design did not match any known in the Council's registries. Speculation ran rampant. It was in this fever of rumor that the revelation broke. A retired officer from a void war, speaking to a journalist from a neutral system, identified the tactics used in the ambush with chilling certainty. The maneuvering patterns, the weapon sequencing, the precise timing. It was all textbook Baba Yaga. Not the myth, not the ghost, but the human war commander whose campaigns had reshaped battlefields, whose very name had been used to frighten recruits into discipline. She had disappeared from official records years ago, presumed dead or hidden by her government. Now it seemed she had been hiding in plain sight. The story spread faster than the king could contain it. News feeds replayed the footage of the pirate destruction, overlaying it with archival clips from the war. Commentators speculated about her reason for coming to Varric Prime, about what information she might have gathered, about whether her presence had been a warning to the king himself. Veterans from half a dozen species came forward with stories, whispers of operations that could only have been orchestrated by her hand. In the court of Varric Prime, the mood shifted from curiosity to fear. Those who had been friendly toward her now found themselves envied by their peers. Those who had opposed her began to wonder if they had been marked for retribution. The king summoned his advisors, demanding strategies to counter the narrative, but their answers were hesitant, their voices uncertain. He saw in their eyes that they no longer fully believed in his ability to protect them. Her return to the station was not part of his plan. He had expected her to vanish into human space, leaving him to manage the fallout. Instead, she requested a final audience, citing diplomatic courtesy. He could not refuse without appearing cowardly, and so the meeting was arranged. The great hall was full, as if the entire court had come to witness what would happen.